Okay, so I think this time around, I wanted to talk to you guys about something that's a little bit more in the wheelhouse of the competitive Street Fighter community and what they've been discussing that I'm completely on their side for. Though I did say I don't particularly care for the idea of 3 out of 5 because I know it will spill into the effects of other events. I will then follow up to say, I think that the Capcom Pro Tour needs a really, really close look. Like a very, very close second, third, fifth pass. The community's done a pretty good job expressing what they want, but I'd like to say my piece as to how I think it should go next year if things were ideal and could meet every circumstance for every player involved in the Capcom Pro Tour. So I think it was kind of strange that I failed to mention some of the things that I do in the community when I talked about rule changes and stuff like that. I'm going to give a little bit of credentials so you have a better idea as to why I talk about these kinds of things as opposed to just being a talking head. And I appreciate everybody that watched that. And if you haven't, you can check it out. I'll put it somewhere over here. Either way. I'm Ham Jamps. A lot of people call me Ham, Dom, etc. I'm located in Chicago. I run the Midwest World Warrior out here. I'm one of the owners of Low Kick Esports. I run Roundhouse. I do a lot of production work at Combo Breaker and at Frosty Faustings, and I do command center work at Evolution. I have a general idea as to how these things go, and I will again reiterate that I am a frequent Street Fighter player and Street Fighter watcher. So if you're ever wondering who I play, it's Geef. It will always be Geef. I mean, the man's on my door right there. That's my GOAT. You know what I'm saying? I got a Geef poster that I haven't put up quite yet. And I think I can say at this point, I've put in probably more hours on a PC for these games than any other game in my library outside of maybe PlayStation 4, Soul Calibur 6. So all of this to say that I've been doing the whole Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter 6, World Warrior thing since World Warrior was introduced to the Capcom Pro Tour. Haven't gotten fired yet. Hopefully that stays the case. With that said, it gives me a little bit more insight as to how everything is going, and I'm a little bit more focused as to how things go. So understand that not only does the come from the background of me benefiting from its existence, but also as a spectator, I've got the best seats in the house. I know a lot of what I'm going to say is going to come off as a, how do you say? It's going to come off like I don't like online tournaments. Let me lead with that. As an offline tournament organizer, I have my biases. Let me be very plain. Let me be very clear in that regard. I like offline tournaments, but I also like World Warrior because that's work I can do from home. I can see the benefits of that. I still get to interact with my community, maybe not so closely, but some of the magic in regards to that is a bit missing. I remember being up super friggin' late every time a Capcom Fighter stream went live, and I was locked in. Everybody's watching some of the best international competition you would see in the world for Street Fighter. Back in the day, on any given weekend, you could tune into a Capcom Fighter stream and see a pool of some of the best fighting for placements in some premier and furthermore ranking events, as well as a regional final. This means that though some players were traveling the world with their massive sponsors, Fudo comes to mind, who played in roughly 20 offline tournaments, 14 of them being outside of Japan in 2018. They had a reason to leave the house and be rewarded for their effort, or more important to the competitor, their consistency. Let me give you a quick breakdown so that those of you who spent a very long time shitting on Street Fighter V for being bad have a general idea as to how the CPT worked before Street Fighter 6 came out. The format in 2018 was a mix of points gained for premier events and ranking events, as well as a regional leaderboard, creating a top 8 for a regional qualifier. The premiers being the big ones we all know and love, which included EVO. 18 of those. Lots of points to be had for people who placed well enough. And the rankings being up-and-coming events that were still worth something, as opposed to literally nothing, bolstering your score on your regional ranking board, as well as your global leaderboard, ultimately contributing to your participation in Capcom Cup. There were 32 of those events, as well as 2 online brackets per region. The way that the system worked out is that the top of the regional leaderboard got thrown into the top 7, with an LCQ player that was present at said event being able to participate and qualify for the regional final offline. The previous Capcom Cup champion was also auto-qualified, but for the sake of seeding would still compete for a better overall standing. Champ got to defend their belt, region are forced to have representation, and everyone has to go somewhere unless you're strictly banking on the regional qualification. And because Street Fighter V was so volatile, as they say, everyone wanted in the safest way possible. This format gave us 13 players from Japan, 2 from South Korea, 1 from the United Kingdom, 2 from Taiwan,
coming at you from little Taiwan out here in Chinese Taipei, baby.
1 from France.
I'm like, you still play Ken, huh? You're saying Ryu beats Ken, and this character beats Ken, and lots of characters beat Ken, huh? Oh no.
2 from the DR, 1 from Norway, 1 from China, 1 from Singapore, 2 players from the UAE, 1 player from Peru, and finally, 5 players from the United States of Freedom. This final total is going to bring us about 18 players from Asia, 5 from North America, 3 from Europe, 2 from the Middle East, and 3 from Latin America, leaving Oceania and Africa unfortunately completely out of the running. Though at the time, Capcom wasn't doing a very good job getting events in those regions in the first place, making it very difficult for those players to qualify. So now that we're done talking about the previous CPT format from a inferior game, this isn't me saying that Street Fighter V is better than Street Fighter 6. Y'all gotta stop hating on Street Fighter V. But that format worked, or at least well enough. There were some things that could have been tweaked, but let's move into Street Fighter 6. In Street Fighter 6, now we have people like Brian F. who make videos about how difficult it was for Mena to qualify, having gotten second a couple of times, getting second at EVO, and barely squeaking it out through easily North America's hardest World Warrior region.
Tries to hop, wild hop over. Things cannon. Look at the chip. Look at the chip. This is where it gets scary. This is where it gets scary. Dude can't he can't do anything. He's gonna take this DI. Yeah, he can't. Stun. There's a lot of damage. One more. It's one more mix-up. Jab check. The trade. And the throw.
But that was in 2023, and now we're in 2024, and the format has changed. But in some ways, I would say that it's worse. So this is the situation that we have at hand due to the way the Capcom Pro Tour runs right now. 6 offline qualifying events. These are what they call premieres. There's also super premieres, but we'll get to that. As it stands right now, 4 of them have already taken place, and I gotta say, it's pretty cool seeing Zangief in there, but it doesn't really do a lot of favors for the people that are competing in the event themselves, considering that outside of first place, they get nothing. A little bit of compensatory money from Capcom, but outside that, they're pretty much out of luck and they're back to where they started. Thus far, in the players that have qualified, you have Mena RD qualifying at Cream City Convergence over there in the Midwest. Outstanding tournament, 1-day affair, you're in and you're out. Get it done as fast as possible. You got Kusanagi qualifying back at home in France at UFA with Ryu after throwing this man 6 times in a row, continuing to go for the 7th, and still managing to DP his way to victory. Then you have Punk, of course, who won Evolution 2024. As an American, I was ripping my skin off, jumping out of my seats, finally taking it with Cammy White, a very fitting name for the whitest woman in fighting games. And Itabashi Zangief finally taking it at ECT. So 2 Zangiefs qualify through the offline means. Please don't nerf him again. Now that we've got those offline premieres out of the way, there's still the 2 remaining Kings of the World, and of course, Blink Respawn in the Dominican Republic. We've got to talk about those super premieres. There are only 2 of these, and they're basically manufactured events by Capcom. The only games that are running there seem to be Street Fighter 6, and we've already got people that have qualified from that. That would be Nephew and Shuto. Nephew qualifying, getting 2nd place, and Shuto winning the whole thing to get himself his position in Capcom Cup. So the situation at hand means that there is only 1 super premiere remaining. That would be in Japan. And then beyond that, you're pretty much just looking at online qualifying matches. This is all going to be World Warrior. This is all you're going to see for the remainder of the Capcom Pro Tour in regards to qualification. We had a couple that happened earlier today, but we'll get to that at some other time. It's already 1 o'clock in the morning. So let's dig into that World Warrior program a little bit. This fundamentally isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's a very good thing, if anything. Now, everybody that cannot find their way to travel around the world and afford getting from point A to point B, because as we all know, travel is not cheap, hotels are not cheap, and living out in a place for 3 days at a time is also not cheap. You can qualify from the comfort of your own home. I have been involved in running World Warrior here in the Midwest since it began. And I think that it's pretty cool because in its own weird way, it is its own regional leaderboard. Now, the only reason why this could be confusing to some is due to the fact that there's also the fact that there are super regions. And these super regions essentially say, if you're the top of your regional leaderboard, you automatically qualify. That's it. You're done. You made it. But then after that, you also have the second place guy who gets thrown into a pool of 7 more players who have been qualifying through the regional leaderboard this entire time to play in the top 8. This essentially puts 48 people into the Capcom Cup. And I think that that in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. But let's talk about the regions and how they split in the first place. So here's the breakdown. You have the super regions, which would be Asia, Asia East, Japan, Asia Southeast, South America East, UK Ireland, France, Europe West, Germany, Europe North/East, Middle East, US East, US Midwest, US/Canada West, Brazil. And then you have the other regions without the super qualifiers. That would be South Korea, Asia South, Oceania, Central America East, Central America West, Mexico, South America West, Spain, Portugal, and South Africa. So as much as it is that I'm a big homer, I love the Midwest, all of our merch says Midbest on it, big fan. I did find it very confusing that they moved Canada over to the East Coast, overall weakening the Midwest as a region, considering Safe won the regional final for us the last time. And he performed really well. Moreover, it also is kind of strange in that the region that ended up getting Canada was the East Coast, an already shark-infested pool of players. The split, in theory, doesn't seem bad, though, because when you think about it, there are a lot of regions that otherwise straight up just wouldn't be able to qualify due to Capcom not supporting their events, or just straight up not having events that could support that kind of capacity in the first place. But let's move on to the good. We've got some good things to mention about the Capcom Pro Tour, but there's obviously way more to the story than that. I have a lot to say about the good, way more to say about the negative. Every region has someone, at least one person that represents them no matter what. TOs from around the world, including myself, can be an active, engaging member of the entire region as opposed to their city, state, or closest distance people are willing to actually drive to. Tons of talent get their chance at commentary at events with a lot of weight. Non-sponsored players can compete in World Warrior on its own, become the face of their country, region, etc. And for the offline events that are included in this section, they can't fail. TOs who manage to acquire a tour status will have an amazing burst of attendance for both spectator and competitor. And to speak quite frankly, this quick burst is going to show these TOs money they would have never seen without Capcom's assistance. And even should they not be involved, as long as the event is well run and fun, rare usage of that word, I know, its reputation will be lifted and the burst may just become sustained success and real consistent growth. Players that like to occupy their time in ways other than just actively traveling 24/7 have an opportunity to stay home, create content from what they do, and simultaneously profit and benefit from not only their performance, but their overall chat experience, while also missing out on the overall environment of the offline scene, benefiting significantly from a group of their peers that really care about them and really love to support them. I think it's about that time to get to the part that most people just want to hear me talk about anyway. Let's talk about the negatives for a second. I hope you listen to the positives, and I hope you listen to the rest of this, but ultimately the negatives are intended criticism for the growth of the Capcom Pro Tour and the sustainment of a competitive scene of Street Fighter. Off the bat, I want to say that there's zero disrespect to any of the organizers that have been involved in any of this video up to this point, or anybody else that I've mentioned in the slightest. I'm going to start with the fact that It seems as though the idea of an auto-qualifying event is good in theory. But these 6 offline qualifying events really do discourage people from attending events overall. I think that the situation you'll create when you have a bunch of offline events that people can automatically qualify for is that they may go to that one and then they will never go to another event again after that. Now, I'm not saying that your entire goal as a fighting game player should be to go to everything in the world, but it should be some kind of cohesion between Capcom and the organizers that are involved, that people want to go to their events and have an incentive to get there in the first place. As an example of how this structure discourages people from attending other events is look at somebody like Itabashi Zangief. Itazan signed up for the Super Regional event, the Super Premiere, I apologize. And after he qualified at ECT, he stayed home. And I think it makes perfect sense that you would do that as a competitor. It doesn't really benefit you to show up and gatekeep because it costs money to get somewhere. You have to spend money on travel, etc. And note, this is a very notable and sponsored player. And regardless of that, he still decided to stay home. This in and of itself is one small case, but there are many like it. Now let's look at somebody like Dual Kevin, mid-best. You know what it is. He participated in ECT, got 3rd. He got 3rd at DreamHack. He got 1st at F2Con, 2nd in Cream City in the span of 3 months. And how does this benefit Dual Kevin? Outside of the prize pool that he won, including the one that was included in Cream City by Capcom and ECT, he's just as far away as he started, outside of the fact that he's already doing really well in the World Warrior. I'm not going to pretend like this man ain't cooking like Walter White out there. He's doing really well in the Midwest World Warrior, and realistically, he'll qualify without having to go into the top 8 at all. But there are surely other players around the world that are very close to qualifying through the World Warrior, but also travel because they may not be able to do it there. And if that's the case, what happens to them? All of their participation for the year basically amounts to nothing. All of them are trying to change their lives for the better in the acquisition of the title of Capcom Pro Tour Champion or Capcom Cup Champ. So if we were to take another player just in an imaginary scenario, right? Let's take somebody like Magnegro. Magnegro's from Bama. He goes to offline events. Let's say that he does 3 of them back to back to back. Man's got kids. He's got a family. If he got 3rd in all 3 of those events, it would mean literally nothing. If he was underperforming on the World Warrior, he's basically in a position where he's screwed, and all of that effort went to nothing. No closer to the goal of the $1 million, no close to life-changing amounts of money. He's boned. We have to find a way to incentivize players to travel, acquire sponsors, etc. But you have to be realistic about whether or not those sponsors benefit from that at all, and whether or not there's a reason for them to be involved in the slightest. I think that the auto-qualifying events aren't necessarily purely bad, but I do think that there should be far less of them, and that we should return to a global leaderboard overall. I think that realistically we can put 1 per continent, have like 5 people, 4 people pull up, get their qualifying spot, and they're done. But outside that, everybody else should be in a state of some level of grinding. I think that global leaderboard would resolve a lot of that, with the exception of one important aspect of the Capcom Pro Tour. So I want to talk about that prize pool. The prize pool is probably one of the most vicious aspects of Capcom Cup this time around, mostly just because of the fact that the splits are so unfavorable for someone who doesn't win the whole thing, that if I was fighting for second, 100%, I'd be wheeling and dealing. I'd be hitting that, hey, you wanna split this pot? Like, what are we doing here? Be realistic. Nobody wants to have to play a $900,000 money match. And even for the people that make it to Capcom Cup that year, they're fighting all year, or half the year really, because Capcom Pro Tour is fairly short to make $1,500 if they don't get very far. And hell, if you make it halfway through the bracket, you make $3,500. I make more money as a TO. Now, that's probably a bit of an overestimation as to how much I actually make as a TO, but that's for the year. You understand what I'm saying? 5th place at Capcom Pro Tour doesn't even yield you the salary of a McDonald's employee in Chicago in 2010. It was $17,000 for a McDonald's employee in 2010, for context. The distribution of that prize pool is pretty unreasonable, and it could be spread out so much better. So I referred to my good old friend, my best bud, AI. Maybe it can help me make a better prize pool split than what was proposed at Capcom Cup this year. All right, so we're going to do this live, all right? So bear with me on the misspellings and the typos. Make this a more reasonable prize split. Okay. You know what? It's not bad. Not bad. If you can't read the text by chance, let me just read it to you, right? Basically, it says that 500,000 of those dollars should just go down from the million, and it should be first place takes 500,000, second place gets 200,000, third for 100,000, fourth for 50,000, fifth through sixth is 25,000 each, seventh through eighth is 15,000 each, ninth through 12th is 10,000 each, 13th through 16th is 7,500, 17th through 24th is 5,000, 25th through 32nd is 3,000, 33rd through 48th is $2,000. Now, mind you, this isn't going to change the world, but I don't think it's the worst structure, and this is on its first pass, right? And I don't think that organizers generally rely on AI to come up with their structures. So this is not exactly a good thing to go off of, but it shouldn't be significantly better than what we have. I don't want there to be another situation where somebody competes in Capcom Cup, wins a cool $1 million, and starts throwing all their money at VTubers and never play Street Fighter again. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be that high of an amount either, though. If it was for $1 million, that's dope. But Chris Wong probably still works a full-time job. Uma will probably not work another job for a very long time. It's just so common sense. It shouldn't be the way that it is. And I think that anybody can sit down and say, hey, maybe these divides can be a little bit better to incentivize people to try a little bit harder, do a little bit better, and make the competition fierce, because at every level, you're trying to climb up this ladder. And the ladder gradually incentivizes you to do just a little bit better. Those differences aren't so different that it'll change your life rung by rung, but it'll be different enough where you'll want that. It's a difference. That, to me, just seems pretty basic. So, I've done a lot of complaining. I think that's pretty obvious about the format that we exist in today. But it would be unfair of me to just throw a whole bunch of things I don't like without coming up with some level of solution, perhaps, or at least some form of compromise that works with Capcom and works with its player base, works with its spectators, works with its tournament organizers to make, I don't know, a better Pro Tour for everyone involved versus what we have right now. Let me just get this all off my chest. The solutions that I've had spinning around in my head for a little while. 1. Offline events have to come back in a very big way with a global and a regional leaderboard. You got to get those pro players out of the house when it's possible. This creates interest in your tournaments because you actually get to see people from around the world fighting for something they really, really want. Divvy up the CPT prizing across the events. Even if that amount isn't that much, give them something to fight towards. How does this benefit us as a community, you might ask? The TOs can sustain their events with a bolstered attendance, and with the Capcom boost, more people will see their event and attend, even just for fun. More funds to the TO's event means more resources to the players, better venues, better merchandise, more setups, and everything else a player might ask for. Maybe even a continental breakfast. As long as the regional leaderboards come packaged with a global leaderboard, everyone is still capable of qualifying. Most importantly, it brings out true international competition. With a global leaderboard for international players to pursue, there's a way better tournament to watch. The homers can root against the invaders. The invaders can be the quiet minority in the crowd rooting for their friends. It's hype, and sometimes the results may shock you. But we keep the auto-qualifying events too. A smaller number, let's say 1 per continent. This is going to give players that are part of the very gifted few that can absolutely smoke a bracket, record a video on their Twitch stream, throw together a thumbnail in 5 minutes, title the video how I won X tournament. They get to make their money, their fans are happy, everybody wins. You got to add more offline events with a ranking system based on scale of said event. And then we can all relive turning on Capcom Fighters in 2018 to awesome matches with unexpected attendees competing when it matters the most. As long as there's no added regional final. Best points win. With a point system, we have the return of seeding to the Capcom Pro Tour. No company is ever going to say out loud, this region is actually not that strong. So they make it random. Eliminate the chance of the fabled Pool F by implementing a point system. It's as objective as possible and does a better job separating players from their countrymen. Removal of super anything. This also applies to offline events. Lame duck matches are boring, the players are far less invested, and it hurts the appeal of the grand finals. But for the World Warrior, it ultimately says, we think this region is better, but we didn't want to say that, so here's a chance for a ton of good players to pull up. This is also not good. Run World Warrior one of 2 ways. Include it in the regional leaderboard, but have those be weighted a little bit more heavy. You have the alternative option. You could just not include it in the regional leaderboard at all and continue to run it as it is with one change outside of the super regions. The first place qualifies. No top 8. You have people play in 5 tournaments. They're encouraged to never miss one. Then they go into the top 8 in a worst case scenario, having been the second best in their region by miles, only to bust her out in grand finals one time. Reward their consistency. Let them earn that spot just like the Travelers will. This increases the value of viewership because every tournament matters again. As it stands, no one I know hits me up and says, oh man, CPT World Warrior France is on, time to lock in on Discord at whatever hour that is for us in America. They don't care. They watch the finals of a region maybe, and that's reflected in the viewership overall. Though the CPT recaps really help, I don't think they should be the only solution. Capture a better audience. Give your regions reasons to care outside of the finals of their region. Alright, that's all I got this time. I flapped my gums for a long time about all of the different complaints I had with the CPT format, the World Warrior format, etc. And I'm hoping that in the near future, some of this information gets circulated to the people who have a bigger platform than I do. My intention is to get this kind of conversation going in a bigger way so as to allow more people to see it, more people to discuss it. Hopefully it catches on to Capcom. If they see it and they are aware of some of the issues, maybe they will take some of these propositions, because you can't expect every change to happen, but you can at least expect some of them. And I'd love to hear some of the opposing viewpoints on that regard. With that said, I appreciate you listening to this whole thing. Thank you for being locked in for a half hour, and I'll see you guys on the next one. I'll see you later.